Yesterday, Frank Turk posted this over 1 hour video, The Greatness of Charlie Kirk, an eyewitness account of his life and martyrdom. As you may know, Frank Turk was very close with Charlie Kirk and was present when Charlie Kirk was assassinated last week. We're going to play like the first 40 seconds or so of this clip of this video, and then I'm going to offer my thoughts on the other side. I will probably come back and review the rest of the video at some point, although maybe not. We'll see. But let's just take a look.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is going to be the most difficult show I have ever done. Many of you know I was with my dear friend Charlie Kirk when he was murdered last week. He was martyred for his bold faith in Christ. And
Okay, I think that's actually where I'll stop. Um, so the first thing I want to know is I want to reiterate that the death of Charlie Kirk was evil. It was a murder. It was an assassination, and it is a tear in the social fabric. And my heart goes out to his grieving wife, Erica, and particularly their two children who now have lost their dad, and also to people like Frank Turek, who clearly loved Charlie Kirk and was close to him, and to all the people like Turek and 3,000 kids who were had to be witness to this terrible, evil action in real time, as well as people who have been negatively impacted by the loss of Charlie Kirk around the world. So I want to reiterate all of that. Yes, it was a murder. Yes, it was an assassination. Was it a martyrdom? That's the question I want to ask here. Well, to be a martyr comes from a Greek word meaning to witness to something. And within Christian discourse, to be a martyr is to suffer and die ultimately and experience oppression and die for one's Christian witness, which then raises the next question, because then the ascription of martyrdom narrowly would seem to imply that we know something of the intentions of the individual who killed and assassinated Charlie Kirk. You see, if that person killed Charlie Kirk because of his stated views on trans people, or because of his stated views on Democrats, or on migrants, or Black people, or some other group, if that was a motivation or the motivation for his actions, rather than because Charlie Kirk confessed belief in Jesus Christ, well, then by that definition, he wouldn't be a martyr for his Christian faith. He may have been a martyr for something else and was also a Christian. And so we would need to know something about the intentions of the person who killed him. And I don't know that we know that, have that information, that that person specifically targeted Charlie Kirk because he was witnessing to Christian faith on that university campus. However, there's two things I do want to say here. I think, first of all, this may tell us something important about Frank Turk's understanding of what Christianity is. For a long time, Turk has shown himself to be among the most thoroughly MAGA of the evangelical apologists. And I'll say it's been very disturbing to me over the last few years to see how many Christian apologists have become, I would say, MAGA light. People like William Lane Craig, others who've been much more positively MAGA, perhaps maybe Doug Groothuis, Mike Licona, and above all of them, Frank Turek. So what this says to me is this, that to become a MAGA evangelical, it's a well-known fact that since about 1980, evangelicalism has, in the United States, at least white evangelicalism, has been conflating the gospel and Christian identity with Republican Party affiliation. And over the last 10 years, during the Trump era of the Republican Party, Trump has identified himself with the Republican Party to the extent that the Republican Party has become something of a personality cult centered on Donald Trump. And so that Republicans who don't align with Trump, who criticize Trump, become labeled as rhinos or Republicans in name only. And so Republican political affiliation has become centered on the personality and the personality cult of Donald Trump. And that means that white evangelical identity has largely been focused on the personality cult of Donald Trump. It's become a MAGA evangelicalism. It's this new sort of thing. It's a kind of Christian nationalism, but really centered on the central personality of Donald Trump. And that was Charlie Kirk for sure. He was somebody who was committed above all ideologically to supporting Donald Trump. As I noted in my previous video, Charlie Kirk was among the most vocal in calling for the release of the Epstein files until Donald Trump gave him a little phone call on July 16th, at which point Charlie Kirk suddenly stopped talking about the Epstein files, said, I'm not going to talk about it anymore. He was really concerned about pedophiles until Donald Trump told him, stop talking about those files, and he obliged. That's what it is to be centered on Donald Trump as a personality cult and to have aligned your Christian identity with Donald Trump. Now, here's what this means then for somebody like Frank Turek. By the way, I've got allergies, so if you see my eyes a little teared up uh, or I'm sniffing, it's not because I'm emotional. It's because of, I don't know what's in the environment. Maybe I need to vacuum. But what this means then is so you'd have two people, let's say, come on a university campus. The first one, they're going to talk for an hour about Jesus, and they're a Democrat who's working in the inner city with refugees. And the second person comes on the university campus and they talk for 58 minutes about um, Donald Trump and Republican Party politics and wedge issues like trans kids in sports and abortion. And for 2 minutes, they mention Jesus. For Frank Turek, the second person was a witness to Jesus because they were presenting this MAGA Jesus gospel. The first person who talked about serving the needs of refugees from a place of Christian faith, but who was a Democrat, they're not a witness to Christ in the same way because they're a Democrat and because they're promoting refugees who are quote unquote illegals and maybe they're eating pets. And that is the result of Frank Turek's understanding of Christianity. It has completely been melded with Republican Party affiliation, which has become a personality cult centered on this one person of Donald Trump. So, from that lens, yeah, Charlie Kirk definitely was a martyr for his faith because he was on a university campus. He died talking about trans kids and guns. And his whole presentation was pro Donald Trump. That is the MAGA gospel. So it does make sense according to um, Frank Turek's lens. But to call it a distortion of historic Orthodox Christianity is, I think, a gross understatement. It's like saying the prosperity gospel is a distortion of Christianity. The prosperity gospel is the eradication of Christianity in place of something else, but still using some Christian nomenclature that makes it sound familiar. I think it's similar when you come to the MAGA gospel represented by people like Frank Turek. The last thing I'll just say is this. When you frame the life and death of Charlie Kirk as a martyrdom, yet you're now creating a saint essentially for the MAGA movement. So just as evangelicals, hold on a second, I'm just going to check a name. Sorry, bad memory. I was just checking. So in 1956, Jim Elliot was an evangelical Christian missionary who was martyred for his faith in Ecuador. And he's been sort of one of the key examples of like a modern martyr for evangelical Christianity, witnessing to Jesus to bring about new disciples of Jesus in Ecuador among the indigenous peoples. In 2025, in the MAGA gospel represented by people like Frank Turek, Charlie Kirk is the new Jim Elliot. He has given his life for the MAGA gospel on a university campus. And what that does then is it baptizes his entire life as a witness to what this MAGA gospel is. What we then simply need to do is to look at the life and teaching of Charlie Kirk and consider and ask ourselves, is this in fact a faithful witness to the life and teaching of Jesus? Does fidelity to Donald Trump and to Donald Trump's political movement, his othering of refugees, his dismantling of the state, the development of a new oligarchy, does that align with your Christian understanding of discipleship of Jesus? Quick note, just yesterday, the New York Times, this is extraordinary. They published a new investigation that back in April, the United Arab Emirates transferred $2 billion in cryptocurrency to to an account related to Donald Trump. So he was given $2 million personally through his organization from the United Arab Emirates. And a few weeks later, the US government gave the United Arab Emirates access to some computer microchips that are very, I don't understand this, I'm not going to pretend I do, but that they're very high level, they're at the very top technologically, and they offer new possibilities to develop artificial intelligence. And the United States had always refused to give the UAE access to these microchips for reasonable concern, among other things, that they would share that information with China. But suddenly, within a few weeks of receiving $2 billion from the United Arab Emirates, the US government now releases this. And this looks, among other things, like a bald quid pro quo, this for that. That is an example of the kind of level of corruption you're dealing with right now in the Trump administration. But if you are witnessing to Donald Trump, then I guess that's not a bad thing because your life and witness is to the Trump Jesus movement, which I would submit is very far from anything that is recognizably Christian.